When the kidnappers gave Joseph the choice, he let go of his childhood sweetheart and chose me. But I didn't go with him because I knew he would regret it. In my past life, everything happened the same way. After I was rescued, Chloe, the girl who had been kidnapped alongside me, was found with compromising photos taken by the kidnappers. That same night, she took her own life. Joseph pretended not to care, and went ahead with our wedding as planned. But from that point on, he made my life unbearable. 7 years later, when I finally managed to get him to agree to a divorce, he lost control of the car on the way to finalize the paperwork, and drove off a cliff. Even in his final moments, he blamed me. It was always our debt to Chloe. This life was meant to atone for her, so who are you to live in peace? Now, given a second chance, I don't want to live like that again. Back in this life, I remember waking up to the terrifying scene all over again. The kidnappers were pressing a knife against both mine and Chloe Tan's necks. They gave Joseph a choice. Who would he save? His eyes flickered between us, clearly torn. After a tense moment, he made the same decision as before. He reached out for me. But I shook my head firmly. Joseph, you should save Chloe first. In this life, I don't want to owe anyone, and I don't want to carry the weight of someone else's fate. He seemed almost relieved at my words. Jessica, you're my fiancée. I should save you first. But if that's what you want, don't blame me. And with that, he left with Chloe, afraid I might change my mind. But unlike him, once I make a decision, I never look back. Back then, things had gone exactly like this too. He came with the ransom money, but the kidnappers raised their demands. They said they'd only release one person. In the end, Joseph was forced to choose me. While we went back to gather more money, the kidnappers decided to take advantage of the situation. They took inappropriate photos of Chloe and nearly assaulted her before we returned with the police. Though they didn't finish what they started, the damage was already done. Her dignity was stripped away. She returned home broken, and that same night, while everyone was asleep, she slit her wrists. By the time someone found her, it was too late. Joseph, hearing the news, showed no concern. He handled the funeral calmly, even giving a large sum of money to Chloe's family. When I suggested postponing our wedding, he refused outright. Jessica, marrying you was always the plan. We can't let outsiders affect that. But that outsider haunted him for the next 7 years. Marrying me wasn't about love. It was about guilt. He wanted me to atone for Chloe. But what had I ever done wrong? This time, after Joseph and Chloe were gone, I started thinking about how to save myself. Because I wasn't sure if he'd come back. In the last life, he had secretly slipped a tracker into Chloe's pocket when he hugged her. That way, even if the kidnappers changed locations, we could still find her. But this time he seemed to have forgotten that completely. I guessed that deep down, the person he really wanted to save had always been Chloe. It was only because I was his fiancée, and he didn't want people judging him, that he chose me painfully. After all, ours was a marriage of convenience, and our feelings weren't deep. Chloe had been with him through the purest parts of his life. They were childhood sweethearts, closer than anyone. It made sense for him to regret his choice in the previous life. In this life, he finally got what he wanted. I was genuinely happy for him. But I didn't forget to look for a way to escape. I remembered that in the previous life, when the kidnappers moved locations, they passed by a nearby car repair shop. The mechanics there were tough, and in that life, the kidnappers tried to hide inside. But the owner refused to let them in. A fight broke out, and the kidnappers ended up fleeing. Later, during the trial, the repair shop owner even testified against them. So this time I waited for the same opportunity. Just like before, the kidnappers left one man behind to watch me while the rest went toward the repair shop. My hands were tied behind my back, and the guy in the driver's seat didn't think much of me. Taking advantage of his distraction, I bit down hard on the car door handle until I managed to open the door. Then I pushed it open and ran forward as fast as I could, straight toward the repair shop. I was taking a gamble, hoping they wouldn't just stand by and watch me die. So I charged right in, making no attempt to hide. The shop was already in chaos when I arrived. I spotted the young owner immediately. His features were sharp, his posture upright, and he radiated a quiet kind of strength. Combined with his quick reflexes, there was something undeniably cool about him. Afraid of getting caught in the crossfire, I crouched low and tried to dash toward him. But I miscalculated my speed. When I stumbled, I knocked him to the ground, landing right in his arms. My face paled as I stammered out an apology. "I am sorry, could you please help me?" He glanced at me, brows furrowed. Then, without warning, he grabbed me and rolled both of us across the floor just as a chair crashed down where we had just been lying. If he hadn't reacted quickly, I probably wouldn't have survived. Still shaken, I noticed the kidnappers had realized I escaped. What began as a takeover had turned into a hostage situation, with both sides now in a standoff. Looking up at the man beside me, I whispered, "If you save me, I'll do anything you want." But he didn't respond. Instead, he watched the kidnappers thoughtfully. Someone behind him muttered, "Jonathan, sometimes it's better not to get involved." So his name was Jonathan. When the leader of the kidnappers called for me a third time, I took a step forward, only to feel a firm hand press down on my shoulder. "No," Jonathan said simply. "She's under my protection today." It felt like fate was on my side. Just then, the sound of roaring motorcycles echoed from outside. A confident smile spread across Jonathan's face. "My backup has arrived." Hearing that, the kidnappers glared at me in frustration, cursed under their breath, and left. Only then did I allow myself to breathe again. And just as suddenly, I felt the ropes around my wrists loosen. Jonathan had cut them free. "I'm Jessica Lynn," I said, reaching out my hand. But instead of shaking it, Jonathan stared at the deep, bloody marks the rope had left on my wrist. "Let me take care of that," he said. I shook my head. "It's just a small wound. It's nothing." He raised an eyebrow. "Who was it that just said she'd do anything if I saved her?" Without waiting for my reply, he pushed me gently onto a bench and fetched a first aid kit. "Brace yourself," he warned. I bit my lip as I watched him carefully clean and bandage the wound. A warmth spread through my chest, one I hadn't felt in a long time. I remembered how, in my previous life, shortly after marrying Joseph, he came home drunk one night. As I helped him back to his room, I casually mentioned he should drink less. He flew into a rage, shoved me away, and I fell to the floor. My jade bracelet shattered, slicing into my wrist. I screamed in pain, clutching my bleeding arm. Joseph just stared coldly. "Does it hurt?" "Should." "Chloe's pain was 1,000 times worse than yours. If it weren't for saving you, she wouldn't have been humiliated by the kidnappers. She wouldn't have ended up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart grew colder by the second. "But the kidnappers took both of us to threaten you. You chose me. Why are you saying this now?" Joseph sobered slightly, but his eyes remained icy. "Jessica, I never wanted this marriage. If you hadn't told Grandma you liked me, she wouldn't have forced me to marry you. So what are you saying? That if it weren't for me, you would have only needed to save Chloe?" He didn't answer. I laughed bitterly. "Joseph, you're ridiculous. You blame me instead of the kidnappers." After that, no matter how bad it hurt, I never told him anything again. Now, here was this stranger, afraid I was in pain, blowing gently on my injured wrist. My eyes welled up with tears. I blinked them away and asked softly, "What are you doing?" Jonathan looked up, smiling. "When I was a kid and got hurt, my mom used to do this. Does it feel better?" He nodded. "Yes, much better." Satisfied, he continued tending to me. But the peaceful moment didn't last long. "Ming, I heard someone was causing trouble at your repair shop, so I rushed over." A tall man with a tattoo entered, and when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Wow! Where'd you find such a stunning girl?" He grinned, clearly smitten. "Wow, this is rare." I don't think I've ever seen such a beautiful girl here before. Jonathan stepped in front of me protectively. Thanks, but the situation's handled. And the rest is none of your business. I'll buy you a drink another day. The tattooed man paused, then smirked knowingly. John, now that you've got a girl, you don't even want to deal with your bros anymore? He turned away playfully, pretending to be offended. Jonathan sighed and pulled him aside. Can't you take a hint? Go cool off somewhere else. Ming, is she your girlfriend? What do you think? Totally. You two look perfect together. Smart guy. You owe me wedding sweets. You'll get your share. They kept whispering not far away. Even though they lowered their voices, I could hear every word. To ease the awkwardness, I pretended to be busy looking around. Anywhere but at them. A few minutes later, Jonathan finally sent the tattooed guy away. Once he was gone, he asked, "Where do you live? I'll take you home." Maybe it was selfish, but I didn't want to go back just yet. After all, my parents were always busy with their own lives. Even if I didn't go home for a month, they wouldn't notice. As for Joseph, if I was right, he was probably reborn too. And this time, he was likely eager to spend his life with Chloe. In the previous life, even after 7 years of marriage, he never took me to any events, never shared a room with me. Whenever people asked about us, he wore that same cold expression, eventually turning me into a joke among our circle. This time I'd keep my distance. So I looked up at Jonathan and asked softly, "Could I stay with you for a few days?" I tugged gently at the corner of his shirt, giving it a little shake. From both lives he seemed like a good person. And he was capable of protecting me. If I stayed close to him, would he refuse? Jonathan leaned in closer, his gaze unusually intense. "Little girl," he murmured, "if you keep this up, I might take it seriously." Maybe it was because he was so close, but I could even smell the fresh scent of his soap. I swallowed nervously, about to say something, when a familiar voice cut through the air from behind us. "What are you two doing?" It was Joseph, that we were all taken in for questioning after what happened at the repair shop. While we waited for our turn, Chloe still wouldn't let up. "Jessica," she said sharply, "why aren't you saying anything?" I gave her a cold look. "Why should I explain myself to you? You're not a cop." She was momentarily stunned into silence. Joseph, clearly unable to take it anymore, stepped in to defend her. "Jessica, Chloe's just trying to understand so she knows what to say and what not to during the interrogation." "Oh, so you two are planning on lying to the police?" "Shut back." Joseph exploded. He stood up, pointing a finger at me. "Jessica, you're being ridiculous." Just then, Jonathan came out of the interrogation room. The moment he saw what was happening, he stepped between us without hesitation. "Put your hand down," he said calmly. There was no shouting, no anger, just quiet authority. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone was enough to make Joseph lower his arm. Hiding slightly behind Jonathan, I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel the tension crackling in the air. Joseph finally asked, "Who even are you to her?" Jonathan turned slightly, glancing at me with a small smile playing on his lips. "What do you think?" I looked up at his strong profile, the way he carried himself, and on a whim, I made a little heart shape with my thumb and index finger. He didn't react, but Joseph saw it, and his face darkened. Just then, an officer called Joseph in for questioning. After everyone had been questioned, the police finally had some solid leads. They'd identified the suspects, and now the main focus was capturing the kidnappers before the investigation could move forward. But I already knew who was really behind it all, Joseph's business rival. As we left the station, Jonathan looked at me and said simply, "It's fine." I blinked, confused. "What's fine?" He smiled slightly. "What you asked me earlier about staying with me. It's fine." Finally understood. He was agreeing to let me stay. "It's just me and my mom at home. She's away at the old house right now, and I usually stay at the repair shop. You're welcome to stay." I was about to say yes when Joseph interrupted. Jessica, your parents already know about the kidnapping. They should have landed by now and are probably heading home. Are you sure you don't want to go back? A bitter pang hit my chest. Of course he knew more about my parents than I did. For as long as I could remember, they'd always been too busy. Too busy to remember my birthday, too busy to come to parent-teacher conferences. I used to act out in school or even hurt myself just to get their attention. Only then would they briefly appear, giving me a sliver of the love I craved. Eventually I stopped hoping. I started celebrating my own birthdays and hired a kind lady who sold flowers to attend my parent-teacher meetings. I grew up in that loneliness until I met Joseph. Back in high school, he casually blocked a basketball that was about to hit me. Under the afternoon sun, he looked especially handsome, sweat glistening on his forehead, eyes sharp, voice cool with a hint of arrogance. "Careful, classmate," he said. That one sentence was enough for me to fall for him completely. At the time, I was too shy to do anything but mutter a quick thank you and run off. But from that day on, I paid attention to him. I learned that he had a childhood friend named Chloe, but back then I didn't think much of it. My quiet crush on him grew deeper over time. Even a simple glance from him would send my heart racing and my face flushing. I knew I wouldn't have much say in my future marriage, so when I found out that Joseph was going to be my arranged husband, I was overjoyed. My parents liked him too, and they kept in touch with him more often than with me. In my previous life, when I tried to ask for a divorce, my parents were completely against it. "Joseph is capable and even puts up with your bad habits. You should be grateful instead of making us worry," they told me. I knew that ever since our marriage, the Lin and Shen families' businesses had become deeply intertwined. Getting a divorce wasn't easy. So I endured year after year, until I developed depression and began self-harming just to force Joseph to agree. Now that I had a second chance, I wanted to live for myself this time. That's why I didn't want to go home. But there was something I needed to deal with first. Before leaving, I took Jonathan's phone from his pocket, entered my number and called myself. When I heard my phone ring, I handed his back to him. "Remember to save my number. I'll come find you in a few days." With that, I hailed a taxi and left. I didn't spare Joseph even a single glance. When I got home, my parents were waiting in the living room. Before I could say anything, they started scolding me. "Joseph told us what happened today. Can you stop being so reckless in the future? Those were kidnappers, Jessica. You could have been killed. And you told Joseph to save someone else first." Mom sighed heavily. "How can we trust you with the company if you keep acting like this?" They never trusted me. In the last life, they handed over the family business to Joseph, then went off to chase their own dreams while I suffered. Dad, who had been sitting silently on the couch, suddenly spoke up. "Let's just get the wedding done soon." I shook my head firmly. "I don't agree. I came back to tell you that tomorrow, I'm going to the Shen family to call off this engagement. Whether you agree or not, this time, I'm making the decision." I paused, then added, "And don't even think about threatening me with the company. You can give it to whoever you want. I don't want it anymore." In this new life, I already knew the trends of the next 7 years. I wouldn't end up destitute. After speaking, I went back to my room. They must be disappointed in me again, right? I didn't care anymore. The next morning I woke up early. To my surprise, Mom had made breakfast and was waiting for me. "Aunt Fong told me you got up looking for food last night. It's my fault. I forgot to ask if you had dinner." Froze, confused. Why was she suddenly being so gentle? She reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Her voice softened further. "Your father and I talked last night. Maybe we've been doing things wrong all along. We wanted you to grow up strong, so we didn't spoil you, afraid it would make you arrogant. But if you want to make your own decisions, that's fine. We won't force you to marry into the Shen family anymore." Was this real? Did they actually agree? Suddenly, I felt a deep sadness rise within me. Little Jessica used to fight and argue, only to be scolded. Then she learned to be obedient and mature, thinking that would earn her their attention. But instead, they only saw her as weak. Now all it took was for me to use their own harsh tactics. And finally they changed their minds. The idea of uniting the Lin and Shen families originally came from Mrs. Shen, Joseph's grandmother. It all started when I saved her at a banquet after she fainted from low blood sugar. She was very grateful and insisted on making me her goddaughter. From then on, I often visited their old house for meals. It wasn't until one day when I met Joseph there that I realized Mrs. Shen was his grandmother. She was sharp and immediately noticed my feelings for Joseph. That's how everything unfolded later. Now, I had to personally tell her that I wanted to cancel the engagement. It felt a bit strange, especially since she had given me the bracelet passed down through generations in the Shen family. I guessed I could only return it now. Joseph arrived before me with Chloe by his side. Both were dressed formally, as if they were about to announce their own engagement. Perfect. After I broke things off with Joseph, they could jump right into their happy ending. As I placed the bracelet on the table, Joseph grabbed my wrist. "What does this mean?" he asked. Right. I'd only told him to meet me at the Shen family's old house. I hadn't mentioned breaking off the engagement. Mrs. Shen looked between us, sensing something was off. "Jessica, did Joseph do something to hurt you?" she asked, shooting a sharp glare at Chloe. I addressed her politely. "Grandma Shen, I'm the one who wants to break off the engagement with Joseph." I said it calmly like I was talking about the weather. Joseph's eyes widened in shock. "Why?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Because yesterday you chose to save someone else. I think that's who you really want to marry, isn't it?" I glanced at Chloe, who was staring back at me with the stubborn expression of a delicate little flower. "No," Joseph said quickly, though his voice lacked confidence. "But wasn't it you who asked me to save Chloe first? I was testing you. And the result was clear." Joseph was speechless. Mrs. Shen sighed. "I heard about what happened yesterday. You're a good child, Jessica. It's Joseph who isn't worthy of you." "Grandma," Joseph tried to protest. She cut him off gently. "Joseph, I won't stand in your way, but I hope you realize what you've lost." Joseph turned back to me, gripping my wrist tightly, so tightly I thought he might break the bones. "Jessica, I won't agree to this. Don't even think about it." The wounds from yesterday hadn't healed yet, and now his grip was reopening them. I endured the pain, suddenly finding the whole situation almost amusing. In the last life after Chloe died, Joseph mourned her for 7 years. Now, having been reborn, he couldn't wait to save her all over again. Would he finally find peace this time? Only time would tell. The moment Joseph stepped into the repair shop, I could see the storm behind his eyes. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since we were kids. Then he turned to Jonathan, scanning him like he was trying to memorize every detail. "I'm taking Jessica home," Joseph said, voice tight. Jonathan didn't move. He stood there, calm as ever, like a wall between me and my past. "She's staying here," he said simply. Joseph's jaw clenched. "This is none of your business." Jonathan finally turned to face him fully. "It became my business the moment she asked for my help." Chloe, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "Jessica," she said, her voice soft but sharp, "why don't you tell them what really happened?" And blinked. She smiled. A smile that wasn't sweet, not innocent. Just knowing. They already know part of it. But not everything. Like how you knew exactly where they'd take us. Or how you knew about this place. Or how, even tied up, you managed to escape so perfectly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Tell them, Jessica. Tell them how you remembered." A silence fell over the room. Jonathan glanced at me, confused. The tattooed man raised an eyebrow. Even the officer paused mid-note. Joseph's face went pale. Because he understood before anyone else. "You remembered," he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Chloe took another step closer. "You died once, didn't you? And somehow you came back." There was no accusation in her voice this time. Only curiosity. I looked at Joseph, Chloe, at the people who had shaped my life in both timelines. Then I looked at Jonathan, and something inside me settled. Yes, I said quietly. I did. Later that night, after the questions, after the confusion, after Chloe made a few calls and suddenly stopped pushing, I sat on the hood of Jonathan's car outside the repair shop. He handed me a warm drink without saying anything. I smiled softly. Thanks. Again. He leaned against the car beside me, looking out into the night. So you remember everything? He asked finally. Everything. He nodded slowly. That explains a lot. I looked at him. Does it scare you? He thought for a moment. Then he shook his head. No. It just means you've lived enough lives to know what you want now. I looked down at my hands. Hands that had been tied, broken, healed, and held by the wrong people for too long. This time, I said, I'm not going back. Not to Joseph. Not to Chloe. Not to the life I used to live. Jonathan looked at me then, steady and sure. Good, he said. Because this time you're not alone. Months passed. Joseph disappeared from public view. Rumor had it he left the city, gave up the family business, and cut all ties with the Shin name. Chloe stayed in the spotlight a little longer, but eventually faded into quiet obscurity, perhaps realizing that some debts can never be repaid, and some people are meant to walk away. As for me, I started working at Jonathan's repair shop. Learning, laughing, living. We didn't rush into anything. We just existed together, side by side. Two people who found each other not by accident but by choice. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was happy.